going to pass over to Alison. So that's Alison Sheffield from Social Farms and Gardens, and she'll be hosting the rest of the call. Hand over to you, Alison.
Hello. There we go. Right. So I'm from Social Farms and Gardens. It's great to see a couple of members that I recognise on the call. Tim, Ross and Y, Kate at Swansea Community Farm. I'm sure there's more of you as well, but lovely that you're able to join as part of this as well, which is grand. Yeah, as Larry said, I've been working, kind of building connections between groups in the voluntary sector and the private sector for about 8 years now. I started off working in Birmingham at the Voluntary Services Council there, so with the Volunteer Centre, particularly working with very small community groups accessing corporate teams, and just kind of trying to facilitate that and make it a bit more accessible for quite small groups who maybe weren't used to working with a big company. Social Farms and Gardens, we're a national membership organisation. We've got around 1,700 member groups, care farms, community farms, city farms, community orchards, community allotment projects, CSAs, and we provide training and resources and networks to support those groups and to operate across the UK successfully. So it's fantastic to be part of this because this just absolutely fits in with kind of what we want to be doing and partnering with more organisations. So very much from a kind of farming and gardening background, but hopefully a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about today will be applicable to groups, whatever sector you're in, whether that's youth work or working with older people or people with learning disabilities. Obviously, a lot of farms and gardens are just using their spaces to reach out to people, and Social Farms and Gardens is all about the people in the nature. So hopefully that sounds relevant to you. So kind of got three key aims for today. So initially understanding why your group might want to work with a business in your local area. Secondly, thinking about how you could work with that business. And then finally, just hopefully, if you're still with us at the end, going to try and boost your confidence a little bit to be able to approach those businesses. But hopefully by that time, we'll have given you all the skills and ideas and enthusiasm for going for that. So we're just going to kick off with a bit of technology, and I've asked Lara, I think Sian, actually you're going to host, aren't you? We've got a couple of polls just to get a bit of an idea about where you're coming from, and hopefully we can try and tailor today's session a little bit. Obviously there will be some things that are more applicable to others and things where you are, but if we could have the first poll up, please, Sian. Let's see how it goes. So has your organisation worked in partnership with a business before? Just give a few seconds.
Give a thumbs up if you can see that. Yeah, you can see people answering.
Okay.
Got 75% of people voting, 80%.
Brilliant, thanks everyone. Good to know your technology is working as well, that's fantastic. Because I know some people on phones, so it's a bit harder to participate in something like that.
So we're at 30 seconds and got
fantastic.
So I'll share the results now and you should all be able to see that.
Okay.
So 20% of people, yes, many times, 27% of people, yes, once or twice, 39%, so quite a big percentage of people on this call are no, and then sort of 5 and 9% are unsure or not applicable to their kind of situation. So quite a lot of people on this call either not at all, or we will have people on the call that have worked before and potentially can be bringing some experience to the discussions as well. So I'm going to launch poll number 2, which is, was your experience of working with a business positive? So you should now be able to see that one. I've got people voting again. So I'll give it 30 seconds. And we're up to 86% of people voting, and it's kind of peaked off, so I'm going to share the results. So 20% yes, 23% somewhat, 2% no, and then those other unsure and not applicable are probably those people that haven't done it before. So there we go.
Okie dokie. That's great. Thanks, Sian, and thank you everyone for participating. hopefully that'll just help us kind of frame what we're sharing today. So we'll probably aim it at quite a kind of entry level. So if you have had a bit more experience, it'd be really great to hear from you, particularly when we go into smaller groups later on. If you're able to give some of that first-hand experience, it's so valuable to other people who might be starting out in this area. Right, so we are going for an interactive session, which hopefully with 57 participants will work. But we thought we would give it a bit of a go, having a kind of mind mapping session. So we've got a question which we're going to start off with, which is why build connections. I'm going to try and share this, so just bear with me as I just try and find that new bit there. New share. And what we apparently think we should be able to do is take on here. So this is going to be a fantastic mess, isn't it, guys? We're going to go for this. And if it doesn't work, we'll do it slightly differently next time. You
want me to help explain how people can do this?
Yes. Can you go for it, Larry? Thank you.
So basically now we're going to try and annotate this document, and Alison's going to give us an idea of what you want us to annotate, but you should be able to see a button that says view options, and there should underneath that be a button that says annotate. Now, and then you'll get a little little toolbar. It might be different if you're on a different type of device, but you'll get a little toolbar, and you'll be able to put a you can use stamps. I'm just doing some there. You can add text. So that's kind of, so if my suggestion is we do 30 seconds of everyone trying to find that and playing with it. And then we can see if that suits everybody.
I've tried to make as much space as I can there for people. So apologies that the main bits are fairly small. So it's saying, why do we want to connect with businesses? So thinking about in your situation, why do you want to do that? I've just put a couple of examples. So financial donation, probably the main driver for why people might want to connect with a business. And then another idea might be to be a supplier to a local business. So those are the kind of ideas that we're looking for.
So just to explain again, as someone's just asked me to explain that again. So you should be able to see a button that says view options and the word annotate, and then you get a little text box up. If you can't find that, don't worry, pop it in the chat. So Alison, if you can clear the screen and then everybody can add, because we've all been doodling, haven't we? Let's be honest.
Right. Should be able to go. So any thoughts that you've got on there? Stop food waste. Lovely idea. Volunteer gifts. Say thank you.
Nice.
Lots of financial donations.
If you're not able to use this, guys, feel free to unmute yourselves and share. We're only going to be doing it for a few minutes, or pop it in the chat. Sorry if it's, I appreciate people have got different technical devices.
Develop volunteer banks.
Developing volunteer banks, thank you. Getting more volunteers. We've talked about people saying about volunteers. Are we thinking about kind of one-off volunteers, multiple volunteers, skilled volunteers, regular volunteers?
Business volunteers and skilled people who want to give back to their community, like a sort of payback.
Providing services into the business.
So joining their supply chain to an extent.
Maybe things like if you're a counselling service, providing counselling to employees and stuff like that.
So additional things they might not realise they need yet. But
yeah.
That's great. We've got supporting a community bus there. Any expansion of that? Is that to fundraise for it, or is that to have it, or is that to drive it, or to lend it? Any more information you could add on there?
Oh, I took that out of the chat. I was trying to be clever and take things from the chat and put them on the annotation, but I can't keep up. Too many ideas.
It's fantastic, really good ideas and great. I think this just really shows how beneficial it is to have sessions like this where we can talk to one another and have different ideas about how you can what you can get from something where we might have just said, oh, we'll just get them to give us some cash. Actually, there's a whole load of other ways that we can be interacting. And this is
sorry, Alison, I'll save the chat, and then when we do the follow-up email, kind of collate a bit more of these ideas into a bit, because there's lots on here, so we'll do that as part of the follow-up.
I think I'm gonna stop that annotation. Oh, we've got someone writing local.
Alison, if you don't mind saving it.
Yeah, there we go. I'm gonna save it now, okay?
Great. It's always fun to try and do this, because sometimes it goes really well, sometimes there's so much you can't even see it, so we have to move them around.
I'm just going to save it again because I like that point there, free expertise and specialised fields, and written in bright red. That's really nice and easy to see. Right, so I'm going to go back to the main screen just so just stop that for a minute, or I can leave those ideas up there. So yeah, what I really wanted us to think about there was a starting point is that it's not just around financial donations, that there's other ways that we can be interacting. So that idea of offering your services that are additional to what a company might already be doing around counselling, for example, mindfulness, access to green spaces, and thinking more widely about what a business might be doing. But then also we've got things about what advice you could provide in terms of maybe reducing waste. And then also around the kind of physical things. So that could be equipment, that could be kind of access to kind of use of equipment. So it could be like a donation of equipment, or it could be use of donations, use of equipment, like using a photocopier or a printer that they have. It could be waste products from the company that are useful for you. So particularly thinking about a building site may have products that could be really useful to you. It could be actual things that they use on a regular basis and they give you a share of them. It could be using some resources such as their transportation systems. It could also be things about networking, which I think we've put in there as well. So actually opening up new networks and new people, and then potentially accessing that for trustees, for marketing, for finance, for advice. It could be legal advice, HR advice, all these kind of financial advice, professional advice that's quite hard to come by, and if you've got someone trusted that you can go to for that. Really interesting there around policy development as well. I like that idea of actually being able to tap into another voice, and actually if we can share on the voluntary sector and the private sector together working on something where there's some policy development, I think is really, really interesting idea. So we're just going to clear that, and then we're going to move on to our next question. So I'm going to see if I can do a new share. Actually, I'm going to start a whole new session. I'm going to think about what types of connections we can build. So we've talked about the end product, I suppose, about what we want to get out of it. Thinking about how we can, what the relationship might look like. So it could look like a corporate volunteering. I put that in exclamation marks because sometimes we don't think it's called volunteering, but maybe it's a bit more like a community action day for a team from a large company, or a formal charity partnership. But there's lots of other ways of connecting with a business that might be more appropriate and more successful at achieving some of those outcomes that we identified in the previous sheet. So again, are we good to go for it? Do some more annotations? And yeah, kick off if you can think of any things either that you've done that you'd like to do, or that you just think potentially that's an idea. Is everyone able to annotate?
No.
If you aren't able to do that, that's not a problem. Do unmute yourselves and join in. We'll have the discussion, or put it in the chat if you prefer. It's not a problem. You can start anything. It's kind of just to clarify, Alison, the reason we're doing this is to kind of initially get an idea of where people are at and what people are trying to get out of this session. And this session's looking a little bit more of how we can build those connections, right? Just to make that.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Explain that better. I didn't explain that very well.
I like that, using a local VSC for a point of contact. Are definitely easier in some places than others. Asking the business to provide advice, lovely. Get a workforce exchange, something around mutual benefit. So I like that idea of using a site for a wildlife area. I like that. So making a commitment from yourselves as well. So asking for space or time that can be match funded. Got gardening here, which is always gravitate towards. I don't know if that's looking at offering your services as gardening, offering a space for gardening to take place, offering services to look after a garden on a site, on a company's site. Looking at short, medium and longer term connections. That's great. Social media presence, using that to make connections. Yeah, and that's a really good point there. We've got someone that's written about seeking to tackle social problems. Private businesses are also stakeholders, and had a really good example of that in Birmingham. There was a large factory, and they'd found that they had a lot of antisocial behaviour going on, and so they kind of, I guess, considered a couple of ways of sorting this out. And one of the things they did was to build up like a wall around the site, and that was just getting more and more vandalised as they became more and more isolated from the surrounding community. And actually what they eventually did was took the wall down and invested in a local youth group, and they started to do partnership work with the local youth group and really try and encourage employment of local people. And actually then when they started to have a stake in that, so the business themselves understanding that they had a stake in the local community, and the local community understanding that they could have a stake in the business as well, it alleviated a lot of those social problems they were finding around vandalism and antisocial behaviour around their site, which was a fantastic example of that. It was a lot of investment from the company, but having the local youth group that was really active and really could see the benefits of partnering with the business was really beneficial there, and wouldn't have been able to happen at all effectively without that local connection. I like the idea of customised sponsorship relations. And again, there's loads of stuff here which is really encouraging about recognising what benefits you can provide to the businesses in the first place, that it's not a one-way street, that it's not just about you getting something from them and them being the givers. It's about a two-way street, which is really what I wanted to bring out of this. So for people who haven't worked with businesses before, we're starting on a really good footing, which is very exciting. Right, I think we'll save that now, if that's okay, Sian and Larry, and I'm gonna
brilliant. Save that.
There we go. Right, I'm gonna stop the share and then I can see people again. It's disconcerting. So if we just reflect really on what we've just discussed, so we've thought about, hopefully for people who haven't connected with businesses before, we've had a little think about how you might be able to do that. So that could be through, why you might want to do that. Sorry, so it could be for financial donations. It could be to join a supply chain. It could be for a new market for your services, potentially a way of selling your services that you can then subsidise for people who can't afford them, for example, counselling services. It could be around resource exchange and materials and products. It could be around networking. whether that's for contacts or for expertise. And it could be around workforce sharing and support, and it could be around space sharing. I think those are probably the main areas where you might want to be building connections that we thought about there. I'm sure there are other ideas there, and I'm sure there'll be specific ideas that we'll be able to draw out in small groups shortly. And then we're thinking about what type of connections you might want to bring in order to result in those things. So you could be networking through a formal kind of charity partnership relationship where there's an application form and it's very much driven by the company and they're looking for a partner, and you apply to that. Often they are very large things, and it's a very time-consuming process to apply to be a charity partner. And I was once, it wasn't too long ago, and we got through to the final round of the Network Rail, and then it went to a very large, well-known company because it's voted for by staff. And actually it tends to be the charities that are very well known that tend to go for those things. But often you will find that local charities and local companies are also looking for charity partners that they can invest in. And some of the larger companies now are looking at their local offices, particularly in urban areas, might be looking for a local connection as well, rather than doing it on a national scale. In terms of the other types of connections you could build, so ones that maybe you're driving yourselves, so you propose sponsorship packages, you propose your services, you propose or you make social media connections, you attend networking events, which are much harder at the moment, but there are online ones going on. And I know one of our gardens in London attended one recently, and I was very impressed, because making connections at the moment under COVID restrictions is really tricky when you can't make those one-to-one connections. So picking up the phone, emailing is unfortunately how it's having to go about a little bit at the moment. So hopefully that's a bit helpful to get us started, and we're going to send you out into breakout rooms now, because there are a lot of you, and this should hopefully give everyone a chance to share, to ask questions, and really I would really encourage you just to be quite confident to just say, I'm really worried about this, I have no idea how to go about this. Or if you've been through something together, be really confident about what you have done before and what's worked well or what hasn't worked well. And the best way for us to learn and to be better at this is to share our experience and share our ideas and share our opportunities. So we're going to send you out into breakout rooms. I think Lowry's been trying to divide you up a little bit, kind of regionally and urban and rural, because we do find that actually it is very different. So London groups have a very different business market, I suppose, than a group in, the middle of Wales, or even in Birmingham and Manchester, they're slightly different. So we've tried to divvy you up a little bit. So hopefully you're with groups who are in a kind of similar situation to you, so might have the same kind of businesses around you, whether that's smaller businesses, whether that's rural businesses, whether that's professional services. And we're going to ask you, we have already asked you to change your name, so hopefully we can miss out the kind of who you are and where you're from, because you've only got 15 minutes for this session. But it would be really useful if you could just share, so go around your little group, when did you start, just to give people an idea of how established you are. And then also who your group benefits. So I know we've got groups kind of covering the spectrum of great works in your community. So are you a garden working with children with learning disabilities? Are you in a community centre for older people? Really, really briefly, because you're all doing fantastic stuff, but if you can just give that in kind of 5 words. And then also, what is your most pressing need right now? Again, in 5 words. I know that's a massive challenge, but what is your most pressing need at the moment that we could start to look at addressing? And then I want you to think about the businesses in your area. So who have you already clocked? Who's in your area? If you've got someone in mind that you've come to this webinar because you think, I really want a few more tips on how to approach these people, who else might there be that you haven't thought about, and why are you thinking about these companies? Okay, so Lowry, we're ready to go for breakout rooms.
I'm going to hand straight back over to Alison. Alison, did you want any thoughts or feedback from that session, or do you want to just go straight into your PowerPoint to share some tips?
I think we're going to carry on. If anyone's got anything major that they want to share, just give a couple of minutes. You can unmute yourself and either raise a hand or just go for it if anyone's got anything that they felt was really worth sharing with the wider group at that point?
I'm quite passionate about food, and food is health and wealth. Once you have the knowledge, and food education, in my opinion, has been pretty dire the last 20 years. And I just think just by one person just doing that one thing, whether it's growing the food or anything like that and connecting, is going to have a huge ripple effect on potentially the kids of the future, and let alone anyone else they have contact with, really.
Okay, sorry, who was that speaking then?
Me, Andre Griffiths.
Yeah.
Hi, Andrew.
Hiya.
Wendy, did you have something you wanted to share?
I just wanted to kind of like highlight the fact that I've been working with a lady who does wild foraging, and I think because we have such mass farming that just seems to destroy everything, I think we, like this, the lady said about food waste, if we kind of like went back to what we used to do with, I don't know, like brought more old traditions in and encouraged people to kind of like look around them and I suppose have like small holdings and things like that, and little allotments and corners in their gardens. And because we've all been at home, not a lot of us have been able to get out, and we've been kind of like, oh, where do we get this from? And they've stopped making it. There's not as many choices on the supermarket shelves and things like that. And just working with this lady who does wild foraging walks, and she's got a wild roots group, I think it's made me really, really think over this period of time, like, what are we doing? The mass destruction of everything is, I don't know if this is a place to say this, but I think the lady you just said about food waste, it's just awful. We need to really, really do something now, because things are becoming, time's running out for this planet. If we don't turn it around, I think we're gonna regret it. Well, we won't see the regretting, but I didn't know if that was the right thing to say. Sorry. There's some lovely books by an author called Robert Macfarlane, and he's been writing some storybooks that are beautifully illustrated, but they're picking up on words that are kind of falling out of the common vernacular, I guess, for kids. So words like wren and kingfisher, they were finding like kids don't know those words anymore, and just things that as older generations we would have been taught by our grandparents or our parents, they're just not really in nature and learning these words. So he's making these books as kind of series of poems, and they're really beautiful, and I'd encourage them. But he's talking about somebody reading it to their parent who's got dementia, and it's just conjuring up all this imagery, and it's trying to reintroduce all these words that we're losing, and it's sort of losing these words of nature but bringing them back. And there is the kind of sense in our common culture now that we have been losing that, but we want to turn the tide. And I'd really recommend, on the back of your kind of comments, as something people look into. They're really, really cool.
Thanks, Shan.
Thanks, Shan. Yeah, they are lovely books.
I can see Kelly's raised a hand. Kelly, did you want to feed something back about kind of businesses that you were promoting, or was that an ongoing chat about?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Just on the food stuff, we've been discussing, I've been to loads of Zooms all over lockdown about food justice, food resilience, regenerative practices of growing, permaculture, just as much as possible. People that are collecting food from supermarkets and making more distribution chains, people that believe we should have like a national food service. You might have heard of this, I'm not sure. But from one of those meetings, a group of us got together. We only had a couple of Zooms, and we've been communicating because we think it'd be a really great idea if as many schools as possible were connected to or actually had a food forest, and had that entrenched in our culture in the future, to teach children quite a lot. Like my friend Ezra Blondell that I met at Schumacher, she wrote a paper or a book called Maths in the Garden, for example. So not just about food, forest growing, so that children can see nature, regenerative practices. It's also coppicing, biochar making, how to look after the soil, because again, it's not just about how we grow and what we grow. At the minute, like that lady said, what's going on in our world, we can build soils. So we have to be really careful how we grow and how we regenerate the soil. But the food forest idea around schools, there's also a proposed National Forest of Wales, which was supposed to start this year but didn't because of lockdown. But in that, it would be joining up the forests that are already in Wales. And the Minister for Health or something it was said they'd also like woodlands and orchards around schools. So I was trying to get hold of them to say, well, why not have some food forest as well? And food forests can be tiny or big, or it could just be like a bit of growing in school, like we do, like Incredible Edibles do, or someone like Jamie or Oliver suggested, you know. So I think that we need to entrench food growing into our school curriculum, because that also teaches all about nature and stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's amazing to see so many people like passionate about food, and there's obviously such a link with food and the kind of, you know, where do we get our food from, and the businesses that we work with locally. I can see a few more hands up. I think we probably need to move on, sorry. But we will have a bit more space for Q&A later on, if that's okay. Sorry about that, guys. So Alison, I'm going to pass over back to Alison now. And you're going to give us a few more tips and ideas, aren't you, about kind of working with businesses?
Yeah, and hopefully, thanks for sharing, everyone. I think one of the things I've come across a few times in terms of working with businesses is businesses are these big bad things, and often as a kind of corporation and as a kind of body, they may be engaged in really bad practices and things that we don't really agree with, and ways of working that don't kind of sit very well with us. But I think what it's really important to remember is that everyone is human, and any individual that you're speaking to at a business has a family, has a neighborhood, has neighbors, eats food, might have children, and actually that one person is part of a business, but they're also a human who's part of our society. And so when you're speaking to an organization that does things quite differently to how you might be doing them, remember that you are speaking to an individual as well. I think what it's really important to remember about when you're speaking to individuals, they might, when they're representing their business, they might have a slightly different hat on, but they can take what you've spoken to them, and if it doesn't translate into something that you can make that connection to their business, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not making a difference to how they're acting within their neighborhood, and with their other relationships. So, you know, it's not always lost. And also I think it is really important on that to remember that they are there in that conversation that you're having with them, representing their business with their business head on, and they've got to make an argument, a compelling argument to their business or to their company, to their employer and to their colleagues of why that company, why that entity should be working with you. So you have to speak to them as though they're human, which they are, and you have to connect with them in a relational way, but you also have to remember that they have a job to do, and while they can use their love of food and their value they place on nature and the importance of educating our children in food, if that's not something that they can translate into a connection for you from their business, from their employer, it's not going to go anywhere in terms of a mutually beneficial partnership, a partnership between your charitable organisation and their kind of commercial organisation. So it's just really worth remembering that. But also thinking that on the flip side, everyone is human. It's just speaking to another person, anyone who's in a business. And something I've really come across is charities or small community groups sometimes get a little bit worried about talking to businesses, and a little bit, oh gosh, how do we speak to them? Who do we find? Where do we go? Actually, businesses find the same thing. They don't know who to approach in the community. They don't know where the points of connection are, because we've kind of diverged into these two very distinct arenas where we operate in this kind of commercial world and then in this community world. And actually finding those points of contact is really difficult. And even the language and the words that we use can be really difficult. And so something that someone brought up earlier about speaking to using your local VCE as your local kind of connect point can be really beneficial, because they can almost act as a translator. So if you can tap into existing schemes, so kind of organisations like Business in the Community, or your local volunteer centre or voluntary sector support organisation. They might have existing schemes that businesses understand and that you can benefit from. So I think that's something that's really worth looking at if you're looking for something that's a little bit more formal, if you're looking to partner with a company that's a bit more established and has got their ways of doing things, so that you can tap into them rather than expecting them to kind of drop everything at the drop of a hat and jump on with your priorities, which aren't necessarily going to be theirs, because there are so many fantastic causes out there. And I mean, I'm personally very passionate about food and the way that we're doing food at the moment, which, yeah, so that's absolutely something that speaks to me, but it's not going to speak to everyone. So kind of from that, I suppose I've kind of diverged slightly, but knowing your audience is really important. So knowing who you're talking to, so do your research. If you're going to go and speak to a company that's down the road from you, have a little look on their website beforehand, find out if anyone you know knows anyone from there, just so you can get a little bit of background information. You can find out what their priorities are. Are they a branch of a much bigger organisation, bigger company? Are they the head office? What kind of staff do they have there? Do they have a lot of finance staff? Do they do a lot of contracts? Do they kind of have the materials, or do they use subcontractors? Do they have space? Do they have issues with their reputation? So you're doing that research before you go and speak to someone, so you have a little bit of an idea where you're going in at and you're not wasting that initial conversation. Out of that as well, thinking about what resources they have. So it might be that you're speaking to a building company, but actually the local point of contact for you is their head office, and they have no expertise in building. They have no materials to do any building with, and they use subcontractors, or they have like a kind of sub company which does all of their actual work for you, and they can't really influence there. So actually that company might be a great source for their staff to do some fundraising for you, or for you to go in and do a lunchtime talk, or for you to provide a venue for their meetings that they could use in investing in the local community in that way. But they're not going to be the people you go to for some more cement and a digger. And then also just thinking about looking at their social media. So what are the challenges and the opportunities that they're facing? So that could be doing a little bit of a news search online. It's all a bit of desk-based research. I guess that's kind of where I come from. But these could be found, this information could be found out by talking to other people locally as well. So what's happening in their sector at the moment? Are there real issues getting new employees? Are there real issues with reputation? Are there issues with kind of how consumers are working at the moment, and things that might be changing? So for example, might want to think about a house building firm at the moment might be struggling with the legislation around using land, and the worries about what's going to happen in the future around people losing their jobs and therefore not being able to purchase new homes. So what are they thinking about there, and how they want to use their land differently that they've already got? So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of an idea and a bit more confidence around when you're approaching someone. And I'm being fairly vague, and I do apologise for that, because one of the issues we've got here is that you are all in very different situations and you're all looking for very different things, and businesses are so broad. So it could be your one-man band down the road. I know a lot of you yourselves are businesses and you're here representing a business, but also maybe a community thing that you're doing. And I guess my kind of what I'm talking about is focusing on those businesses that are more commercial in nature. So some of you may have social enterprise business where you're trying to make some money, make a living, but your aims of that business is very social. What I'm talking about here are businesses that you know, it's a garage, it's a tire fitter, it's a house building company, it's a law partnership. Those kind of businesses where their focus is, they may have some other bits and pieces that they do, but their focus is very much on a commercial thing. So we're not looking at systemic change, we're looking at those businesses that are already operating and how we can engage them in the community work that we're doing. I think that's probably kind of all I wanted to say on there. I've got one more slide, which hopefully, sorry, my screen takes a little while to get through to things. just wanted to talk about knowing yourselves as well, because I think one of the issues we do have in our sector is we get so passionate about what we believe in, and that's what we need. We need that passion to drive forward, to work or to volunteer in our sectors. You know, we wouldn't be here if we were just interested in getting a really big pay packet at the end of the day. We're here because we really believe in what we're working for. And there are so many fantastic charitable causes out there. I think one of the issues I found personally was, I said I used to work in Birmingham at the Volunteer Centre, and I used to try and tap small charities, small community-based charities or charitable groups into some of the businesses that are working in the city. And I always, when I used to speak to businesses, they'd always say, oh, we're doing this fantastic stuff with the Children's Hospital. We're like, oh, not the Children's Hospital again. They've got a team of fundraisers, they've got loads of resources, they're fantastic. And the Children's Hospital used to be the bane of my existence. And then my son needed to go to the Children's Hospital for some surgery, and I was like, wow, the Children's Hospital are fantastic. So even now I've been converted over to the fantastic charitable cause of the Children's Hospital. And I just think that's really important to remember, that you are doing fantastic work, but there are so many other places that are doing fantastic work, and there's so much work to be done, and we can't expect everyone to support everyone. So what you need to know is who you're speaking to, but also know yourselves really clearly, so you can, for want of a better word, sell what you do and why what you're doing is so important, and why it matches so well with what this company is doing, that they should really work with you on this. So know your aim, be able to say it at the drop of a hat, be able to say who you benefit. We talked about that in, hopefully in your small groups, you all had a moment to share that. Who benefits from what you're doing? Is it the elderly people in your community? Is it the world? Is it future generations? Is it otters? You know, who is it that's benefiting from what you're doing? And what makes you special? What makes you a little bit different from other organisations that are doing something? And that's really the moment where your imagination and your passion for what you're doing really can come through, as long as you direct it well and know that you are, you're not the only ones doing fantastic things, but you really are special. You really are doing a fantastic job. And then also just thinking about what you can offer in return. So a lot of what you were talking about and what we were annotating in that very first session is about mutually beneficial relationships. So, for example, the gentleman who said about offering counselling, and I think where charitable organisations can offer so much more in return is because even those commercial services that you can offer, such as gardening services or counselling services, or you know, even if you're grower food, is that you can offer an additional social return on any investment that's made into you. So whether that's the fact that the people you work with have learning disabilities, or whether you reinvest into their local community, or whether you can then offer mindfulness sessions or a green space, or what can you offer that's back to the organisation. And this taps into my final point really around knowing your value. So it's really important that you don't go into a relationship, don't start a partnership thinking of yourself as the poor partner, the poor man. You are really, really valuable, and it is absolutely worthwhile a business investing in you, but you have to explain why that is, and you have to know what you can give back. You're not just going to be the recipients of cash, because there's so much more than that. You might be the recipients of cash, but what is the business going to get back from you for having given you some cash? Is it going to be some fantastic pictures to go on their walls? Is it going to be a place where the families of the people who work in the business can go out for a day out and enjoy the wonders of nature and see what a fantastic place the world is and how important trees are? I was working up in Scotland with a group, and they were looking at getting a team of volunteers out from one of the local distilleries to do some clearing. And they wanted to, at the same time, teach them about the lichen on the site. And these people that had come from the company had no idea what lichen was. But just the passion of the lady who was talking it through and explaining it was really valuable. And there was a real kind of extra step there. So the company wanted to volunteer, the charity or the community group wanted them to come in and use their manpower to clear up all of the invasive species that were working there. But out of that, there's an additional thing where the people who were doing that actual work, who were doing that action day, were going to benefit from receiving education through teaching from the people in the charitable organisation in the first place, but also actually experiencing it firsthand and experiencing close up and spending some real time in the nature and really kind of understanding why we're getting rid of these invasive species, what is the value of this lichen, and kind of seeing that circular thing, and that's really important and really valuable. So I'm just going to check the time. Oh, we are on 10 past. Sorry, I do witter, my apologies. Now, this is where I put myself on the line. We used to run a training session, just a half-day session at Social Farms and Gardens, and I worked in a program called Growing Together, and we called it Pitch Perfect, which was a great film, if any of you don't know it. But anyway, we kind of encouraged groups to perfect their pitch, essentially, which is a bit of a terrifying thing. So if you've ever seen Dragon's Den, they go in and they make the big sell. We don't want you to be doing that, but it's a really good exercise, because it's fairly horrible, to practice having a go at being able to sell your organisation. So if you're speaking to people who just do not understand, who are not on the same wavelength as you, and don't have the same starting point, how do you get in there at the first point? You've got to know the information that you want to put forward straight away to engage them, to have that longer conversation, to get to know them as a human, get to build up that relationship. So these are kind of a pitch is a kind of sale of your organisation and of what you need, and it should be 30 seconds. It's called an elevator pitch. So the idea is that you're stuck in an elevator with someone, and you've got that 30 seconds before they get off to sell your organisation to them, so that they want to find out more, and that eventually, hopefully, they'll support you. I always think of it as a lift pitch, and it's about lifting your organisation as well, rather than just having that space in the elevator. It's also about lift within that elevator. So there's 4 points that I would suggest we need in our elevator pitch, and that's an introduction, a what do you need, what experience do you have, and what you can offer. And getting that all into 30 seconds is a real challenge, particularly when we have that passion and we want to talk about things a little bit more. But this is the idea of this first conversation, is to get a hook. It's not to have a kind of signed on the dotted line, this is what we'll give you. It's to encourage and find the opportunity for a follow-up conversation. So I have done a pitch as a kind of little community garden space. I hate the sound of my voice, and I find pitching quite nerve-wracking. But I'm going to see if I can play this for you. Also, I've got technology, so we'll see. So we do need everyone to be quiet, don't we? So I might even mute myself. I'm going to see if I can play this for you. Hi there, I'm from Grow and Eat. We're the green space down the road. You'll have seen all the kids walking up and down with their veg and mud-covered shoes and wellies. I was just wondering whether you'd be able to help us, really. Our paths are getting in a bit of a bad state due to the rain. It's making it difficult for people with mobility challenges to get onto site. And I was wondering whether some of your team might be able to pop down when you're free and come and have a look, see if you could help us out. It'd be really great, and obviously you can come and have a little look at the veg and maybe take some home for you as well.
Oh, you're on mute, Alison.
Bear with me. There we go. Now that is not the world's best pitch, but it's something. It's a starting point, and what we'd really like for you to do now is to have a little go at doing something like that yourself. So I'm gonna leave this up, Larry. Is that okay? Yeah. And then people are hidden a little bit as well. So the idea of this exercise now is just to give you a bit of confidence. You've had an hour to hear about things, to chat to one another, to speak to other people in your boat, in the same boat as you. So we wanted to challenge you now to do something that's not quite so pleasant, but to really have a go at doing this. And this is really, I suppose, if you can do this, then you can go and do it in real life, really. So hopefully this is the take home from this session. So we'd like you to just spend 3 or 4 minutes with a piece of paper, just on your own, everyone's hidden away, trying to work on a pitch. Now, like I said, this used to be a half-day session, but we've obviously had to cut it down here. So an intro, a what do you need, a what experience do you have, and what can you offer. You could either do it like I did there as a kind of theoretical organisation and need, or you could do it for your own organisation. But what I'd really challenge you is to write something down, and then you can go away and refine it. We're going to then practice it in our groups that we were in earlier, I think, and give it a little go. Because I think if you can do it to a supportive audience who also have something to pitch, then you can do it to anyone when no one's watching.
Alison, did you just want to repeat the questions and I'll type them into the chat? So
yeah, I'm going to leave
intro.
the screen up. Yeah, but okay. It's an intro. So I'm aware some people are on the phone as well. So an intro to who you are. What do you need? What experience do you have? So that's just talking about a bit about your background, let them know that you're genuine, I suppose, that you're not just, oh, yeah, fancy doing that, but you've got a little bit of reliability about you. And what can you offer? So an intro, what do you need? What's your experience? And what can you offer? Where's the value that you bring to them?
Some Q&A, if anybody has any questions that you have, either from the whole session that we've had so far, or specifically about the elevator pitch that we've just talked about.
Can I pick up on a couple of points that people have raised in the chat?
I was about to do exactly the same thing, so I'll let you take over, and if not, I'll point out ones that I've spotted as well.
Because they're fab. I mean, absolutely. If you're working with a larger business, they will have a corporate social responsibility statement. They will have a report which will show them in beautiful glowing light of the fantastic things they're doing, generally appointing loads and loads of apprentices, because that is the top score on the companies, as though that's the only thing they could do to engage with the community, which is a great thing, but not the only thing. So I would always read their corporate responsibility statement if they have one, if you're going for a large company. Obviously, your garage down the road isn't going to have one. But that's a really good point that someone's raised there. And then also someone said about listening, which again is absolutely key. So you will have done some of that kind of listening beforehand by spending that time and research and understanding who you're speaking to. But again, going back to that pitch, it's giving them space to respond to you. So you've taken just 30 seconds of their time to lift up your organisation and your need and your importance and what you can provide back to them, and then you give that space for them to feed back to you and to come back, and they'll pick out words that resonate. So always when I talk about social farms and gardens, it's like, oh, farms, and that's all that hits. So, and as you practice and as you have more conversations, and someone said about if you haven't made that connection, find out why, and take it and make it stronger next time. We had a question earlier as well about charity partnerships and being a constituted group. It's a whole nother session around governance, but I would always recommend being a constituted group, at least if you're trying to engage in a partnership with someone else, especially if there's anything kind of formal in there. I would always try and register as a kind of an entity, so that's a company limited by guarantee or a community interest company. If you're looking to do something a little bit more, anything engaging in contracts, anything say you're going to be delivering anything, because otherwise it's all on you as individuals to be liable for anything that you've written in that partnership. That's a bit further down the line, and I'm sure Eden and I know Social Farms and Gardens do loads of stuff around governance. So if you're looking for anything more formal, especially a formal charity partnership, I would absolutely recommend you being a company limited by guarantee or a charitable interest company. Sian, were there any other ones that I've missed picking up there, or Larry?
Yeah, I'll just grab them. So there's, I mean, the ones that I got were the ones you wrote, so great minds, clearly.
There was also some, not so many questions, but there was quite a few comments about things that people have done recently. So I know that someone suggested that they're a member pioneer for the co-op, and I know the co-op are really community minded and they've got lots of contacts out there. So actually, if you try and get in touch with their contacts, they can put you in touch with local stores. And if you don't know where else to start, it's the kind of thing that you can just go into the store and ask. And I know somebody also mentioned that they'd set up a kind of a networking group as well with local businesses, and it helped promote their charity, but also brought lots of people together.
Yeah, and there will be local networking groups established, breakfast meetings, that kind of thing, and they'll all have gone online now. So if you're up for it, go and show your face, particularly once you've got that pitch sorted and you have that confidence to talk to people. If you go to formal networking meetings, having that pitch sorted it just gives you that confidence to then make those approaches. Wants to say another one. Oh yeah, around connections at the co-op. Co-op are fantastic. Most supermarkets as well have a community champion. So it'll be on a store by store basis as to who's most approachable, but you can go into your local Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrison's. They've all got community champions. You go and ask for them at the reception desk, and they should be able to point you in the right direction. And that's a great way. Supermarkets are a really good example of organisations where it's much easier to tap in on a local level than on a national level.
I've got a question in the chat from Liz. So any advice on the best method of first approach to independent local businesses? Face-to-face, email or call? If there is not a local network, I tried face-to-face, but they were too busy with customers. So it's that first point of contact, how to best approach.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, because you've got to be understanding that's a part of that listening process, isn't it? Of actually you've gone to them and the first thing that you've heard is that they're too busy to hear from you. So I would suggest there is something quite visual, something that you can drop into them. An email is probably just going to get filed away. If you can do a flyer with photos, that's when I'm really glad I work for Social Farms and Gardens. You can get beautiful photos of wonderful people in green spaces. So if you can do something like that with a headline that can be just stuck somewhere, shoved under a door, and it'll be in a pile somewhere that will come up sometime. And then also just making sure that you're really present in wherever you are. So if they're looking for someone when it does suit them to go and find someone for their charity partner or their staff bake that they're having, if you're already obvious in the local community because you're having events and you're posting them on social media, because you're got loads of people involved, because you've got posters on the lampposts, you name it, if you're really easy to contact, then they'll come to you. That's why it's so often it is the large companies that have the large charities that have these large partnerships, because they're the ones that people know, that people have a connection with already, and that they know where to find the point of contact is. It's about making yourselves really visible and really easy to make touch with. So I hope that's okay, Liz.
I'd also, just from experiences I've had professionally in the past, just being really clear on what your ask is, or so that you're going into a busy business that's got deadlines and whatever else. So what exactly are you asking? That might need a conversation to develop, but if you can be clear on what you're sort of asking, and then an invitation is quite a powerful thing. So not just this email about all kind of what you are, but use that pitch and then invite them to something or an event or a talk like this, just kind of next step to the initial meet, I guess, is quite a useful thing to go in with as your idea.
Yeah, make it easy. There's a garden over in Cambridge who've got a wish list on their website, which I really like. Obviously you have to go and actively visit it, but it's just a really easy way for people to see how they can help. Because if you go and say we do all these amazing things, people get overwhelmed. If you can give them, you can be part of this in this really simple way, make it bite-sized. That's great.
And I think Kelly's just put a comment as well about actually it really makes a difference what we were talking about earlier about the rural and urban, like if you're in a local town or in a city, kind of knowing who's around you and knowing what's opportunities there are locally, because it will vary quite a lot, won't it?
Absolutely.
Are there any other questions, any other burning issues that anybody would like to send to Alison while we've got
James Hunter from Belfast has just asked a question. Has anyone heard of the big soup too? And I'm just curious. So I don't know
Actually,
if James can answer.
yeah, actually, that too is a mistake. It's meant to be quotation marks, but never mind. The big soup is an idea where people with ideas pitch their idea in front of an audience, and the audience is invited to have some soup. And basically, they pay a donation on the door towards the soup. And then at some point, maybe music and stuff provided as well, like a social evening. And then at some point, the people will make their pitch, and we all have votes, and we vote for the best pitch, and they get the money to kickstart them. So I'm just thinking that'd be a very good way to practice your pitch. Actually, in front of a bunch of people. It's not exactly connected to business, but it is a way of pitching yourself, which I find very hard, actually. So the more practice, the better. And you could be looking at some business to share the space where you might carry that activity out. It could be another way of looking, and then hopefully some people from that business might be there and pay attention. I mean, it really is all about not cutting anybody out of the picture. Everybody is connected. Sometimes I get a bit worried about, like greenwashing, where companies are just, trying to make themselves look good. But even so, still, worth trying. Because really the ultimate solution is everybody has to be on board.
Brilliant. Yeah, we've definitely got a lot of people in our network, and even one of our colleagues that some of you may know, Sam, runs that in her own town in Llandrindod in mid Wales. Soup options are such an amazing community fundraising, like crowdfunding, isn't it? Yeah. But actually using it as a way to practice your pitch before you go to the kind of the bigger, scarier ideas is actually actually a really good suggestion. So yeah, thank you for that.
Welcome.
I'm just conscious of time. I'm realising it's past, and we did say that we'd try and finish at past. So unless anybody has any burning questions, to be honest, if you do, you can share them with us later on, or we can put them, we've got a Facebook group. I'm just going to add the link to our Facebook group in the chat, because we would love to see your elevator pitches. And actually, Alison, hopefully you'd be happy to have a look at some of them as well, and actually maybe you could give some feedback if people want, because that's what we were hoping to have a bit more time to do.
Absolutely, and I would encourage others to give feedback as well, because a critical friend is brilliant. And I think it's very much what James was just saying there. You're pitching to a business, but they are people, and pitching to an individual from a different place and doing a different thing who doesn't know you. There's no reason why they won't have a similar feedback to share as well. It's all about having that understanding and making that connection really obvious.
Brilliant, thank you.